A lot of our research centers at Stanford are really interested in doing MOOCs because they have outreach missions. They have the need to educate people about what they're doing, what they're finding in their research, and they feel like a MOOC is a really good way to do that. So that's usually where the conversations start for us.
Sure. Phil, is that where how the conversation starts in other schools?
No. In an ideal case, I think that that's a very healthy way to start conversations. One of the things that I'm struck by, and I catch myself doing this, is you'll go to talk to a school, and MOOCs inevitably is one of the topics. And you'll get partway through it, and all of a sudden I have to say, okay, how many people have actually heard of MOOCs or really know what they are?
Right.
And I'm constantly surprised how few people really know about it. So I think there's this divide, this almost a bubble of e-learning people who talk about MOOCs almost to death, and then there's all kinds of debates. Then you have the administrators who quite often they're into it, but maybe more from a popular media and institutional reputation. But I see a lot of faculty in a lot of schools who just do not know what they are. And so part of the need, if you will, is for them to even understand, hey, I've been busy teaching, I've been busy doing research. I need to be brought up to speed on what is happening, what the options are. Like Amy, you mentioned the fact of MOOCs with a purpose. What I see at a lot of schools is a need to show them examples or give them ideas so that they even know what types of purposes they could do MOOCs.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of schools where the conversation isn't happening, and there's sort of very different camps who have a very different level of knowledge. And that has to be addressed before you can start saying, how do we support you?
Right. Well, and again, when it's top down, those conversations almost never happen, right?
Sure.
And so you do get the sense of the MOOC being imposed and it having a goal that's not your own anyway.
But it can be a trigger to make that happen.
Right,
So in other words,
absolutely.
the top down can trigger
Yeah.
it if it ends up being a conversation of, okay, let's research this together, let's figure
Yeah.
out what's appropriate.
And you know when I found that that's actually been the most successful, those conversations being generated, is actually when there is a teaching center at the university.
Okay.
And this might not be universal, but for the most part, when I've seen conversations emerging as a result, even though it's been a top-down initiative, when I see conversations emerging that are positive and moving in the right direction, there's usually a teaching center or some kind of teaching resource that's guiding that conversation. That's a really important role for teaching centers to be playing. If they're not already, they need to be thinking about that, because that is not something that a lot of teaching centers haven't really focused on online forever. So, I think that that is something that they need to be aware of and consciously working towards facilitating that dialogue.
Yes.
So let's say you're working at one of these teaching centers and you're engaging faculty in conversations about MOOCs, and one of their first questions is, what do we know about these things? Do they even work? What do we know about MOOCs?
I would say we don't know a ton. We're learning.
Yeah.
What we do know is, in many ways, representative of all the research that we've had for decades on online learning. We know that student motivation is a huge factor, that students who are very, very motivated to be good students will be very, very motivated to be good students, whether it's a MOOC or not. Students who have under-resourced backgrounds, who struggle with motivation, who have constant challenges in their lives that make it difficult to find the motivation to do anything, that is going to be a big detractor from their experience in a MOOC. And so I think we know that student motivation is an issue. We know that there are things that you can do that in some ways at least address that. There are mindset interventions you can do where you just tell students, hey, look, the mind is a muscle. You have to just keep working and things like that. And that actually has some gains associated with it. We also know that communities of learning are so important. And when you start talking about putting that on a massive scale, you're running into some issues, right? Nobody has been able to perfect yet.
Sure.
And I don't think there's a secret magic bullet for it of getting massive communities of learning, because actually probably massive communities of learning aren't maybe totally possible.
Yeah.
That I think really what we need to be talking about is the intersection of small, intimate, meaningful learning communities with larger communities, and ways to leverage the fact that those communities can interact with each other in a large setting, but really keeping the value of that local learning community. That's something the research has always told us, but we really need to think about it in this context, and that's important.